It started out as an idea to create an international city where no country holds power, neither Israel nor Palestine, said by the various religious groups around the world because Jerusalem is holy to vast majority of the population around the world. Maybe it was a brilliant idea, or maybe it was a stupid idea, or it was the only way to take control of the region as the British who colonized it couldn't keep it together for more longer and UN had to make a decision. Right now, both Israel and Palestine have been in a full-blown war for the last couple of weeks. And with over 200 deaths, it's just a small quantity in the bloody history of the both nations. This video will not go into deep about the recent conflict between Israel and Palestine or even the history between those two. If you'd like to hear more about that, do subscribe. I'll cover it later. This video is more specifically about the international relation Israel has built over the years and how it impacted the decision making and how it has impacted the world right now. Let's talk about US and Israel. US and Israel is regarded as one of the biggest allies in the world, if not the biggest. One of the closest allies in the world, if not the closest. Harry Truman was the first world leader to recognize Israel when it was created in 1948. US sees Israel as a gateway to the Middle East. US has always talked about and wanted a peace in the region, and Israel has always accommodated it. The relationship has been twofold, with US providing the military aid through money, aid in the defense, and Israel providing it intelligence and other resources in the area. US has been providing aid to the Israel, which has been biggest, I think, than any other nation in the world, with the biggest being 38 billion in 2016 by Barack Obama. Furthermore, after 2014, Palestine had tried very hard to get a full EU status, but it has been vetoed many times by the US due to its close relationship with Israel. Furthermore, US also has a standby army in case Israel needs it. Like I said earlier, the relationship between US and Israel has always been twofold, due to Israel helping US from its inception and the critical role it played in the Cold War against the Soviet. US and Israel has always had a very intricate bond with each other, with both providing military support to each another, with US through the aid, donations, technology, and Israel through the information it gathers around its area. US has been able to have a firm foothold in the region, along with Israel having one of the best defense system in the world. Furthermore, situation in US is changing right now. So maybe going forward, we'll see a shift of this relationship somewhat, because right now in this recent conflict there was a divide between the Democrats. Some younger members in the US are also protesting against the role played by the Israel in this conflict. But as a whole, US is a very strong supporter of Israel, along with most of the nation in the EU and UK. Talking about India, traditionally India didn't support Israel. It was a very big ally for Palestine. But it all changed in 1992. Even though India was a strong supporter of Palestine back when Israel and Palestine were formed, Right now, India is more intertwined with the Israel than with the Palestinians. Most of the reason of it being a very good trade relationship between India and Israel. The most prominent of it in is defense system and security. Israel also helps India by providing it direct FDI, which amounted to more than 200 million in 2020. These are the some lists of what Israel has been helping, or the trade relationship with Israel and India has been in detail. You can go to this site and check it out for more. I think in the last couple of decades, India has changed its tune to Israel. Because back when Israel was formed, Israel and Palestine were formed by the UN. India took it as a sly against themselves in the beginning, because same case scenario happened to India and Pakistan. But moving on, right now, the political system in the India has changed. The tone in the India has changed. Whereas India back then also supported the vast majority of the Muslim population by sticking with the Palestinians. Right now, the tone in the country is of nationalistic Hindutva, shown by the Modi government. India sees Israel as a big source of trade partner. Well, moving on to China. China is the most prominent non-Muslim country that has come hard on Israel on this issue. Even though China shares some of its defense technology, China has been adamant that the issue should have been solved earlier. It has been calling for the unilateral statement from UN since the beginning, which is blocked 4 times by US. Even going as far as getting a response from the Israeli embassy about the comment it made on US policy. Similar to India, China sees Israel as a potential ally, at least to trade or at least to gain some tech from, due to Israel being innovatively strong. The other nation which has changed its tune to Israel is Russia. Israel, since the inception, was the presence for the US in the Middle East, but it also played a prominent role for the US against Russia in the Cold War, more specifically against Soviet. Beginning when Vladimir Putin came into power, he saw opportunity to collaborate with Israel, as Israel was gaining popularity in its brilliant military and its defense system. Russia wanted to capitalize on it. Alongside, they made, as both of them are one of the prominent weapon exporter in the world, they made contracts such as Russia not selling weapons to Iran, whereas Israel would not sell it to Georgia and Ukraine. There are more than 100,000 Israelis living in Russia right now. Even though Russia's main ally in the Middle East is Iran, Russia has maintained a cordial relationship with Israel as well, with both helping each other in defense technology and Russia mostly getting help from Israel on the drone tech. In the region, Israel maintains full diplomatic relation with two of its neighbors, Egypt and Jordan, with peace treaty signed in 1974 and 1994. The relationship is more or less the byproduct of the peace treaty after the war, when both the war was won by Israel. If you want the land we have captured, you recognize us. And the countries like Bahrain, UAE, Sudan, and Morocco also accept and recognize Israel as a state. But there are other countries which do not even recognize Israel. other countries such as Algeria, Iraq, Kuwait, Lebanon, Saudi, along with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, including Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Malaysia, Mali, Nigeria, etc., don't recognize Israel as of today as a state. The countries such as North Korea, Cuba, and Venezuela also don't recognize Israel because of their relationship with the US. It's nothing personal, I guess. It's more about Israel being uh, a stunt supporter of United States. Egypt and Turkey, uh, they have spoken out on support of Palestine, and Arab League countries and West Asian countries mostly have spoken out on support of Palestine against Israel in this conflict. I guess as a bonus, even though it doesn't matter, country like Nepal has always supported Israel with never voting against it in the UN. And if you guys like the content like this, do subscribe. I'll try and produce more videos as I go along. Well, talking about my opinion, in the long run, I guess vast majority of the emerging countries and even the country developed countries or the developing country will be supporting Israel. I guess it's nothing against Palestine, but with the technological and innovation that Israel has brought to the world, it will be hard for any country to be deprived of it in the long run. Trade and commerce has also brought how close a country are to each other. Israel is poised to be more powerful in the future. That's just my opinion. Do comment what do you think below and do subscribe. Cheers.